Welcome back, everyone, to the latest episode of the Unclassified podcast. We are your hosts, Wheels and Stewie here, and Preston is coming to us live from Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. He has been sent to recapture it now that President Trump has decided that we need, after President Trump convened the committee to reinvade Afghanistan, Preston has been sent to scope it out and get to the bottom of what's going on here. Preston, what's the situation look like on the ground?
Yeah, as expected, the smoke pits are still there. The wiring has been stripped from all of the AC units in every one of the buildings, which shouldn't be that big of a shock because it was happening like as we were still there and trying to leave. Runways are looking a little rough, but overall the hangars seem to be in good shape. So yeah, we're ready to start receiving aircraft any day now.
Preston, what is the objective of retaking Bagram Air Base?
Nobody knows. There's rumors that the cigarettes were cheap, and there were a lot of kind of ad hoc materials, cheap DVDs were being sold in a market that we couldn't replicate back here in the United States. And $5 a carton for cigarettes. I mean, inflation in the United States is just getting ridiculous on all levels. Who wouldn't jump at $5 carton cigarettes? So Pines, Maywans, they're still here in abundance. And we've got the local merchants popping up in anticipation of the troops showing up with their Eagle cash cards.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Preston, for coming to us live from Afghanistan. We do appreciate it. Are the Taliban at least treating you nice?
No, they're not. That's the thing. They still hate us. Yes. It's gonna be a wild ride, Ben. They're still not fans of America, still not fans of the United States, harboring a lot of resentment. Turns out we killed a lot of them, and they remember all of that. So this should be fun.
Is he having you scout out a place for Trump Tower in Kabul after you get out of Bagram?
Yeah. I'm sure there's a spot for it. I don't know. Maybe the Torkham Gate in the east connecting, there's so much trade moving from Pakistan to Afghanistan back and forth, and the Torkham Gate in the east. It could be there. Maybe that's what we'll put it up. I don't know. I haven't gotten into the trade negotiations quite yet. Still focused on security.
Beautiful. All right, Preston. Well, and before we get into that war, which we'll cover at a later date when it kicks off again, we are currently engaged in two wars. Well, I guess one war, and then like a side, like a proxy. It's not a proxy, but like a side war. So, what is going on here in Venezuela, Preston?
Yeah, so quick personal note, you can't turn off the backgrounds while recording, so I'm going to be in Afghanistan for the duration. Yeah, we'll just have to do this remotely. So thanks for the heads up on that one, Ben.
I thought you could. That's my bad.
Yeah. Well, where are we starting? I feel like we should start with Venezuela, right? We carried out another strike last night. I don't know where we stopped and where we begin. There's been at least 3 U.S. strikes, maybe 4, because there were 2, and then President Trump said, no, there's 3. We just only released the footage for 2. And then last night, new footage came out showing another, but we don't know if that was the 3rd or a new one on top of that. So that's where we are. Another one of those go fast looking boats, not getting as much attention as it should. So look, full stop. Venezuela military against the United States military. It's not a close fight. We could arguably dismantle that military from afar without losing a single U.S. service member, just to set the stage. Like, it is not a fair fight, U.S. versus Venezuela. But I don't know how many people are like ready for us to get into a hot war with Venezuela. I don't think that's really in the cards. I don't think a lot of people are wanting to go that direction. Venezuela is presenting it like that's happening. So they began a mobilization called Operation Sovereign Caribbean this week. They moved resources out to an island off the coast of Venezuela, turned on electronic warfare jammers, have surface-to-air missile systems set up out there, as well as like a bunch of tanks, which is kind of a strange thing to put on an island when you're, I guess, defending against the U.S. Air Force. Again, when you're talking about like pure military on military, it's not a fair fight. Like it just isn't. But like I don't think we're looking to get into a fight with Venezuela, I guess, is the challenge here, right? Like I'm seeing this argument of, well, they wouldn't stand a chance and we'd knock them out day one. And like, back it up a second, though. We're not trying to do that, are we? And probably not. I would say there's a very low likelihood we actually carry out strikes against the Venezuelan military, because when you look at how this is being framed, it's all presented as counter narcotics. And the minute we hit, even though there are very close ties between the Venezuelan military and the cartels, like overlap to a degree, going after their military paints this in a very different way. And all of a sudden, it sounds and looks an awful lot like a traditional war. I don't think that's the direction we're going. I don't think that's good for Trump. I don't think that's what he really wants. But that's how Venezuela is framing it. They're arming local militias to protect against a U.S. invasion. And just to kind of stoke those fires a little bit, U.S. Southern Command released a video this week showing the Marines practicing amphibious assaults. So, like, we are playing into this. There's a lot of messaging involved here. My gut still says that our hope is that we add enough pressure that somebody steps up and overthrows Maduro and takes his place. But I'd be lying if I said there's a clear and public strategy involved here.
It seems like, yeah, there's definitely not a strategy as far as we know. But it also seems like they want to continue waging war on what they deem to be cartels or drug groups. Is that correct in your eyes?
Yeah. I think there's, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. I think that's an easy message to get across to the American people. It's very easy to look at the damage that drugs have done in our country. It's very easy to tie that to the drug cartels coming from Mexico or elsewhere. And it's very easy to show a missile hitting a boat and saying, look, we're doing something now. Contrast that with what the hell has been happening for the last 10 or 20 years. I don't want to write it off as entirely theater, but I think there is a theater aspect to this. And that shouldn't come as a shock, right? This administration, President Trump, in a lot of ways, has been very good at that. Showing a message, playing into a message. And I think that's a bit of what we're seeing here.
Well, so they've introduced a bill. Well, they haven't introduced. It's been drafted in Congress to give Trump new war powers to deem any group he decides as a narco-terrorist group, and then it gives him the authority to take lethal action against them. And it does not define this as being a foreign or a domestic thing, but rather both, giving him the authority to do both. It is a far-reaching authority, and Republicans and Democrats in Congress both seem concerned over it. And it's unclear if it'll go anywhere. But currently, that does suggest that they believe they do not have the authority to continue striking these boats without congressional sign-off, which is a rare admission, right?
Well, we're seeing that in the Ben texting tweets to Preston thread this week. You sent me one where there was some reporting that U.S. service members are asking their chain of command to write letters and saying this is legal and putting your name on it. I'm not sure how that stands up in court, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm going to go to the prime example when you're talking about war crimes, Nazi Germany. I don't know that if like a Waffen SS guard or an SS guard at Auschwitz had a signed note from his superior that this is legal, that he's getting off the hook. I don't know. I don't know how that stands up in court. And I feel like we've got a smart audience here, but just to be clear, not comparing our soldiers carrying out operations in the Caribbean to the SS, but how does a note from the teacher stand up in the law in the international court? I have no idea. But it's really
do you
telling.
Think they'll be are you anticipating that they'd be charged in front of a military tribunal or in front of a domestic jury? Because if it's a domestic jury, I think the letter works just fine. I think they'll say, well, bring the guy who signed the letter in here, right? I think the domestic will be fine. But I think you're right. In a military tribunal sense, they'll say this doesn't fly.
I guess the reason I was going back to World War II is a big takeaway from that is I was just following orders is not a valid defense.
Correct.
You cannot say I was just following orders if those orders were illegal. And in some cases, it's very clear that an order would be illegal. There's a woman and a child sitting there on the side of the road. I order you to execute them right now. Hey, that's illegal. Doesn't take a scholar to figure out that you shouldn't do that thing. The challenge is these more gray areas, like the soldier that is being ordered, or the airman, whoever it is, being ordered to execute this strike against a cartel boat. look, there's a lot of information that you don't have as it funnels down the targeting chain. And the reason the U.S. military works, and one of the reasons we're so effective, is it's a mix. We delegate authority to where people are able to make decisions further down the chain. But also that person makes the decision recognizing that they're being given lawful orders. So they don't have to sit there and say, wait a minute, before I push this button to release this hellfire, I need you to run through this entire target packet and provide me every single detail as to why I can do this. That's carried out up the chain of command. And you assume in good faith that your commanders are giving lawful orders. So I don't know. At the very least, I've never heard of this happening. So at the very least, it's signaling some concern in the ranks, assuming that reporting is correct, that there's some issues here.
I do agree with you. And the letter, as you said, suggests that there are people there going, this is not legal. And they, so far, have refused to even justify these strikes. And it just seems as though we are killing random people. They won't even, they can say, oh, they're certified narco terrorists, all they want. But until they prove that to us, that's not true. Like the way the republic works, the way the government works is that they have to prove to the people that what they are saying is true. You're not supposed to take their word for it, right? Now you can say, well, I guess I like the administration, I take their word for it. But we're 4 strikes in now. And there still hasn't been, they're not going on the news shows and making the case for it. They're not going on a podcast and making the case for it. They're not writing the Wall Street Journal. They're not leaking to the New York Times saying this is the legal justification. There's nothing. They're keeping you in the dark and saying, well, we know better than you. And I can tell you for a fact, I am quite certain that Pete Kegbreath does not know better than either one of us. That is for certain. And given that they have fired all the JAGs, I'm not sure that's true either.
So since I'm here in Afghanistan, I feel like it's worth comparing this to the global war on terror and how we executed a lot of those strikes, because I am seeing people draw that comparison and say, we've been carrying out drone strikes left and right around the world for 20 plus years. Why on earth is this all of a sudden different and or worse? And I get it. The reason there is the global war on terror was fought on under a very different framework. So it was all viewed, it began, I should say, as attacks of self-defense. So in response to the September 11th attacks in 2001, we went to the United Nations Security Council. They authorized and said this is a viable use of military force to go after the people that carried this out and to make sure it doesn't happen again. So we've got the international community signing off. Inside of the United States, in terms of domestic law, we passed the authorization for the use of military force that created the framework for the president to go after these terrorist groups that are associated, again, tied back to September 11th, 2001. So that's why you've seen the continuation of strikes against groups like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, the Taliban, and others. There are a lot of other bad groups out there that we have not been carrying out strikes against that are not tied to this. Now, it is a very fair argument to say we expanded that quite a bit. How closely are Shia groups in Iraq tied to, Sunni Al-Qaeda and their September 11th attacks 24 years ago? I gotcha. And I think that's a good debate to have. The second part of this is self-defense. We are always authorized to carry out strikes in self-defense. Like we are on the verge of receiving an attack. That's largely how a lot of attacks recently, say in Iraq or even against the Houthis for a long time, were being viewed. They shot at us, or they're getting ready to shoot at us. We're going to shoot at them. So those are kind of the two metrics. The reason you've seen these strikes around the world for 20 plus years, self-defense or tied to the protection of the homeland based off the authorization for the use of military force. Neither one of those appear to apply here. So the designation of a group as a foreign terror organization opens up a lot of tools for the government to go after them. It does not automatically mean that they are viable targets for killing. It just doesn't. And I think that's probably a good thing because it's pretty easy to put a group on that list. And I think it's probably good that it takes a little more effort to justify the killing of somebody than taking their assets or arresting them or preventing them from traveling. So right now we've labeled these groups as foreign terror organizations. You raise a point that we technically have not proven that they're a part of that organization. Okay. Wouldn't be that big of a deal if we were in the process of arresting them or detaining them. A little bit different when we're killing them. But FTO does not authorize killing. And so then it falls to self-defense. And it's a stretch, to say the least, that 3 guys in a boat bringing drugs to the United States that are 15 miles off the coast of Venezuela or whatever are a direct, imminent threat to the United States. Now, maybe that's the argument they're going to make, is that these drugs do pose a threat to the United States, and they try to walk that line and then have to explain why kinetic action is necessary over arresting them. But that case also has not been made. So I think it's worth noting that there is obviously a lot of information we don't know here. And the people saying this is very clearly illegal are just as right as the people saying this is very clearly legal, because there's all of the detailed intel gathering we don't have in the behind the scenes conversations. But in terms of what has been made public at this point, publicly available information does not point to legal strikes as of today.
Well, it's also, I find, to be quite unexcusable that they will not explain why they're not arresting these people, given the fact that if they're so worried about bringing them to the United States for a trial, they literally have an extra legal prison, a gulag, where they've already disappeared everyone else from the global war on terror to, where they tortured them over in Guantanamo Bay, right? You can toss these narco-terrorists in the same cell of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, okay? I fail to see they have everything open in the playbook, and they're instead choosing military force on who knows what. And I also fail to see how drug trafficking is an executable crime, right? It just seems as though that all the critiques of the American war on terror that were not true, yet were often repeated 10 years ago, are now true because of this. What do you think of that?
Can you explain that further? The critiques that weren't true but now are?
So 10 years ago, back when I was a radical, back in my Ben Panther days, I was very critical of the drone program, believing that it was killing people who had not been proven of being associated with terrorism, and often was careless, drone striking weddings, just kind of went about inflicting terror on people all over the Middle East, all over Africa, all over Asia, with really no explanation given and no recourse for those people. And that the government, at the rate they were drone striking people, could not properly justify any of the strikes that they were making. In hindsight, I think I was quite wrong then. I think the Obama administration was, Obama administration was really when I was quite critical of this, because the Trump administration went underground with it, and I wasn't old enough for Bush. But they did justify their strikes, and they did admit mistakes, and they did pay recourse to the people who were wrongfully drone striked, and they did explain to the American people their rationale for the strikes in press releases, on Meet the Press. They're not doing so here. This is what I thought was happening back then is now happening now. There is no recourse. They're drone striking random people. We don't know who. They won't tell us who. And they also will not list a justification, and they will not list how they think there's an imminent threat. Importing drugs is not an imminent threat. I'm sorry. But the people in Arkansas who you're so upset about dying from fentanyl have the choice not to take it. That does not mean you get to execute other people with your grand military.
I got you. I have a bit of a different take there, where I think that the loose authority that we granted the president after 9/11 was valid for a period of time to meet the current threats.
I agree.
I think it's just been taken advantage of over the years, and it's something that we should rein back in. I think there should have been some sort of limitation on that, or a reason to get back in front of Congress and talk through it again. I think there's a time and a place where you need that rapid decision making, and I think it's hard to justify that I mean, I don't know when that window stopped, if it was 2002, if it was 2007, if it was 2017.
Mm-hmm.
But I just can't rationally say that today the same situation exists of imminent danger, and we need the president to be able to act at a moment's notice to carry out these strikes anywhere around the world 24 years later. It seems like that's probably not the best solution. And yeah, I mean, there's been good uses of that program and bad uses of that program by administrations on the left and the right. The problem is every time somebody comes into power, they're like, I like this. I don't want to do away with this thing. Are you kidding me? So that it doesn't get shot down again. There's been a couple attempts to try to renegotiate or rein in the AUMF, and it never makes any traction. That's frustrating to me. And that's kind of, it's not really where we sit today with, because they're not even pointing to that for the strikes in Venezuela, to your point. Right. But it is a side piece of this. I wish we'd hammer on a little bit more.
Absolutely. It is insane to me that this continues to go on, and that we are now 4 deep and there have not been hearings yet. They briefed some congressional staffers in a highly classified setting. That's what most news reported, but not the members. And if I remember Congress right now, I would be asking why, right? But you're not hearing any of that because everyone's scared of the political optics of it, except Rand Paul. So, hell has frozen over. Rand Paul is once again right, and he seems to be getting more and more right as the days go on.
You know what? Let's veer. We were going to talk NATO, Estonia, and the Russian overflight yesterday, but I think it's worth from there diving into some of the more recent limitations placed on the press, because one of them has to do with the Pentagon reporting. You want to dive into all
Antifa,
that?
But yeah, we can also do that too.
Yeah, we got Antifa, we got NATO. We're all over the place today, man.
We did. All right, so let's go press. So yesterday, the Pentagon said we want the entire Pentagon press pool to sign this piece of paper that says they will not publish any information obtained, no matter what, unless they confirm that they can have it. And they don't want to publish. And if you do publish, you get kicked out of the Pentagon press corps. Now, I don't think, as far as I know, anyone has agreed to that so far. That is their main goal. I think that the Pentagon is playing with fire, right? They are, as I was telling you last night, Preston, when the Pentagon papers leaked, the press did so in a way that just kind of put it all out there, and the government had to eat crow, right? And they had to kind of look down the barrel of the New York Times gun and had to deal with these leaks. And after that, the government said, well, you know what? It would be good for us, since we can't censor the press anymore due to New York Times versus the United States. We should offer up an olive branch to the press. And so now, when the press gets leaked documents, they go through great measures to protect their sources. And then they go to the Pentagon, they go to the White House, they go to the CIA, whoever these documents belong to. They say, we have these, we're going to publish them, but for the sake of national security, we would like you to help us redact information that could endanger the country or endanger service members or people undercover. And for the most part, the CIA, the government, goes, all right, yeah, let's do it. And they work together, and there's a big back and forth, right, where the New York Times says, do you have to redact that? And they're like, we need to. And they're like, but do you actually have to? And they reach compromises. And that is how that works. And that's a brilliant compromise that works for the government. Now, when you're trying to do this whole censorship thing, saying, don't release any documents you don't have unless we affirm it, you're going to get kicked out. The consequence is going to be you're going to have the Pentagon papers all over again. Documents will be published without you knowing what's coming, without you being able to redact anything. And you're going to have to eat crow once again. And, Lord knows what documents are going to come out. It is very dangerous what Pete Hegseth and that cowardly deputy of his are up to. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a good one where we don't. A good one. It's a good example of we don't know exactly what this is going to mean because we've never really done this before. So, on the one hand, what we're hearing right now is any information that a Pentagon reporter receives from anyone in DoD has to be vetted through DoD before it can be used for a story.
Mm-hmm.
Which to Ben's point, they already were not releasing or should not have been releasing classified information. They had this relationship of making sure they didn't cross that line, but that's not what this says. And there's almost, I feel like you could have done this like a pledge, hey, I will not release classified information without running it through the Pentagon. And the reporters probably would have been like, yeah, we're already doing that. But it would make for a scene, and it would make for a talking point, and the Pentagon could say we're cracking down on leaks. But in reality, it wouldn't have really changed anything because that's already kind of the process. This appears to cover any information, including unclassified information. And just so you know, everything that comes out of the Pentagon comes with a classification level, even if it is unclassified. So this means everything. It sounds like the Pentagon, my pessimistic read on this is that the Pentagon will now have the ability to say yes or no, you can't run with that story. News outlets are not going to go with that. But it sounds like that's what they're trying to do. I don't know. I'm having a hard time understanding, like, who put this together? Who wrote this out? It was like, yeah, this will go over well at all. Like, even for the, like, take the partisanship out of this. What news organization is going to be like, yes, we will run every one of our stories through you before we hit publish? Like, I don't care where they sit on the, like, on the political spectrum. I can't imagine a single news organization saying that sounds like a good deal.
I know you're fully right. And the Pentagon press corps has to stick together on this, because there is nothing Pete Hegseth needs more than attention to breathe. It is like sunlight to a plant. Okay. It is like oxygen to a real human. All right. He needs attention to breathe. And if they just say, look, we're not going to do this, we just won't show up to the Pentagon anymore, that is a better option than dividing. And I will say they're in a good spot. They are in a good spot to resist, because the sycophants who are in the White House press pool are generally not in the Pentagon press pool. For instance, the Fox News reporter is Jen Griffith. She's the best reporter, best Pentagon reporter in America. And, that's no disrespect to Dan or, any of our friends who are there, or Barbara Starr, shout out. But Jen is great. And they have to stick together, because if one of them signs it, then, you're just going to have the Newsmax mouthpiece or whatever coming out of the Pentagon. If you don't fight, then you're going to be locked out.
I'm looking up a stat here on press briefings. I'm leaning on Chat GPT, because a part of this
3.
Well, yeah, that's part one of this, is that there's been very few, and some of them they've not taken questions. For reference, that's a tiny amount. What I've been able to find so far is the first 100 days of the previous administration. So under Biden, it was normal. They held 34 on-camera press briefings in the first 100 days. We are 243 days into this term. I think 3 might be the number. I don't know. It might be a few more. It's definitely less than 10. So what we have is a clamping down on what the Pentagon reporters are able to put out. And there's not like another medium happening here, right? So there's been a lot, actually. If we walk through what's happened with Pentagon reporting, again, we've got this challenge where there's so much happening, you lose sight of certain things. But what we've seen in the first 243 days is there was a rotation inside the Pentagon press pool. And we saw spots go to outlets like Breitbart and OAN, and away from like the War Zone and Washington Post, and some that have like had Pentagon reporters for 20 plus years, to outlets that do not have Pentagon reporters and at times haven't had people there to cover the Pentagon. We also saw, they changed the badges for press members to where they had to be escorted anywhere in the Pentagon, which was, the Pentagon's broken out into different sectors, right? Like You've been there. You can't just walk anywhere you want to go.
No.
So you have a badge, and on that badge essentially shows where you're able to go on your own, where you might need an escort. And this is very, very broadly speaking. So there are janitors in the Pentagon. There are, you and I, we had a great Subway lunch at the Pentagon. There's Subway workers.
Oh, we did.
It was excellent. Yeah. So because people work there all day, every day, they at the gift shop, they're selling cookies. They're again, like there's maintenance workers. Those people don't have top secret clearances, right? It is your normal, wonderful Subway employee. Just happens to be at the Pentagon instead of down the street out in the public. I'm sure there's a few additional protocols, but they do not have top secret clearances. That Subway employee cannot wander anywhere they want in the Pentagon. So the press had this middle ground access where they could go into certain areas, but not all. And they did not all have top secret clearances to go behind the scenes whenever they wanted and just like walk into the secretary's office. What that access allowed them to do, however, was to go meet people in their offices, right? That it's not just the SecDef, but there's a ton of people working at the Pentagon, and they could travel around within certain corridors to go to certain areas and go follow up on a story and ask for details instead of having to just sit down in the media room and wait for people to come to them. Because let's be honest, the Pentagon is actually doing work. They don't have people that all day, every day just want to like hey, let me just get up and go talk to the reporter real quick. Because not everything is like some major breaking news story. In a lot of cases, it's like, hey, I need to follow up on that contract. The Army was trying to get new drones for next year. I got to go talk to that guy to just see like, how's it looking? Now, of course, you can send an email. Of course, you can do a phone call. But the nature of being there is you can just sit down with a person face to face and just, hey, real quick, Ben, and build those personal relationships. It's how a lot of the news has happened in our lifetime. They changed the access for the reporters to be less than that of those fast food workers, to where they need an escort anywhere. And they can't provide an escort. So now they have to call an office and say like, hey, I'm trying to get some information about this Navy SEAL operation in North Korea that just broke a few weeks ago, right? They have to call that office, ask for an escort to come down and pick them up and move them through the Pentagon to this other location. Again, the people at the Pentagon are doing work. Do you think they have a bunch of people just sitting around ready for escort duty whenever the press calls? No. So it shuts down their access, restricts their access in a lot of ways. We had that. We had, and now we have this. And on top of this, we have the limited briefings with the press. So we're getting increasingly less out of the Pentagon.
You're absolutely right. Do you remember when we were there? So we had an escort, right? Because, you can't be trusted. And we had an escort. But do you remember that we had escorts escorting the escorts? And that, like, we're down this food court, which has multiple levels above us. And there were people looking down at us. And they occasionally yelled down at the other people we were with. What was it? It wasn't no phones. It was... because there was no cell service. Was it no pictures? It was something like that.
Maybe.
And they would occasionally yell down in these big authoritative voices. And I just thought...
there are reminders, yeah.
And I thought, maybe I have too much respect for this place or something, but I was terrified. I was like, I don't even want to give the illusion that I'm going to take a photo here. I was worried. The other people we were with were just like all willy-nilly. And I was like, okay. And, but you're right. And here's the part that people fail to understand, though. They think these reporters are just showing up, random-ass reporters every day. These reporters have worked inside the Pentagon as, like, their day job, right? They don't go to the Washington Post or New York Times headquarters and then go to the Pentagon. They go to the Pentagon. They have their offices there. They don't live in the Pentagon, but that's where their job is. And they are part of the ecosystem, and they are trusted. They are screened. It's patently absurd, and they get away with doing this because nobody knows that. Because nobody knows that people like Dan, people like Jen, they work. Or who's the guy? Is it Nick Schogel? Jeff Schogel is his name.
Jeff Schogel.
Jeff Schogel.
Shout out Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, these people work in the Pentagon. They are part of the Pentagon, and it's just absurd when people try to pretend otherwise. It's absolutely absurd.
It's a continuation of an adversarial relationship with the press. I think it's on display more in the Pentagon than anywhere else. it does seem like the State Department seems to be doing a pretty fair number of briefings. Rubio is going on a bunch of different outlets. And I don't know exactly how they're treating the press there, but I haven't heard anything like this. All of this seems to be pretty exclusive to the Pentagon. And I don't think it's not good. Like, I don't want information leaked. I don't want anybody putting out data that could put our service members in harm's way. I mean, I got pretty fired up when we found out about Signalgate. That was somebody putting information out there that put our service members in harm's way. I think that's a problem. And it doesn't matter if it's the Secretary of Defense or some random reporter working for any number of organizations. We shouldn't have that. I think we've swung way too far in the other direction, and it's not good.
No, you're absolutely right. And it ties back into the larger attack on the press, larger attack on free speech here in America, that the president, his lackey, Brendan Carr, is on TV, goes on Benny Johnson, who, just a reminder, was paid by the Russian state. He claims he didn't know last year, but how do you not know? You all were saying these anti-Ukrainian talking points for everybody else, but because he's part of the Tenet media scandal. But he goes on there, Benny Johnson, he says, if Disney does not kick Jimmy Kimmel, so many Jimmys, Jimmy Kimmel off the air, then we're going to revoke Disney's broadcast license. And Disney shamefully capitulated, and he's been kicked off the air. And now the president has quadrupled down. I think we're up to tenfold down at this point now. Has said that any news outlet that criticizes him will have their broadcast license stripped. He's gone further to say that any criticism of him is illegal. Any news company that criticizes him is illegal, and that he's going to take action, and that the FCC is going to look into doing things about these things. It is a complete and total free speech crackdown, and they're using Charlie Kirk's death to do that. It's absolutely absurd. It is the most anti-American thing I have ever seen before in my entire life. And as they continue to do this press crackdown, people are finally starting to stand up, but not fast enough, because pretty soon, if he successfully manages to make everyone capitulate, because CBS already capitulated, now the White House has a bias monitor inside CBS that monitors the reporting and reports to President Trump every day, okay, and lets them know if they're too far left, if they're too far right, okay, but he doesn't care, right? All he cares about is whether or not the stories are nice of him. He keeps citing this fake thing that all 97% of stories are negative about him, which is not true. And he says the same about the New York Times. I'll tell you what, as a card-carrying Democrat, last year, I thought about canceling my New York Times subscription so many times over their criticism of President Biden. And guess what? They were ultimately right. He did have dementia. He didn't know where he was, okay? But that's how free media works. They criticize the person of power. If you don't want to be criticized, don't run for president. Stick on your stupid reality show where you work with Gary Busey and Meatloaf to determine who is this season's Celebrity Apprentice. And it's absurd. And American civil society, if they don't start getting very serious about this, Preston, they're going to wake up one morning, they're going to be in chains, right? And it's very common now to see commentators say that they love freedom, but in the next breath, they say what they won't do to protect that freedom, or what they don't believe in doing to protect that freedom. And those people do not believe in freedom ultimately, and they don't speak for the rest of us, because the only way you can protect your freedom is to let the regime know that you will do anything to protect it. And that is how you will keep it. And until you do that, they will continue to infringe on your rights.
So, fun little behind the scenes here. Ben and I were texting, figuring out what the schedule of events would be for the show today. And Ben said something like the crackdown on freedom of speech. And I had to, unfortunately, not trying to be funny, said, which one? Mm-hmm. Because we've got the Pentagon thing. There was a note. I'm still waiting for confirmation on this around further restrictions on service members' use of social media, even when they're out of uniform. We've got the Jimmy Kimmel thing with the FCC. And then we had a threat issued to an Australian reporter that was asking President Trump about his business dealings. And the New York Times lawsuit happened this week too. So again, that was this week. I don't know which one of those is the most important, but it's pretty fucking wild that we don't know exactly which one of those things is the most important. On the negative stories here, something that I have a hard time squaring is it's the media, and the media leans in to, right, they're trying to get clicks, they're trying to get attention. So you have to assume they're always going to kind of lean a little bit further in than maybe general sentiment is. But this YouGov poll that just came out has Trump at a 57% unfavorable rating. So
That's rough.
If it's coming up on 2/3 of the country views him unfavorably, that kind of tracks that like a business model. These papers, these outlets, like they're trying to sell ad dollars. They're trying to be appealing. It seems to me like if it was 20%, it'd be like, wow, they are wildly out of step with the American people. But it seems to me like, I don't know if 97% is right or not, but the idea that more stories would be unfavorable to Trump than favorable seems to track with how people are viewing him. Unless, of course, you make the argument that people have that view because the media is presenting that information. But either way.
Well, it's also patently absurd because the media's job is not to kiss the president's ass. The media's job is to hold him to account. Do we want a media that praises the leader? If you do, we'll just move to North Korea, move to Russia, move to China, move to Hungary. You'll find plenty of that there. I do not know why the president thinks that the media is supposed to agree with him on everything. Maybe he's watching too much Fox News and he thinks everything else should be like that, but that is not what the case is. And it is patently absurd to see so many people I know who on the 4th of July wave the flag, say how free we are, a yeehaw about how many guns they have, and now their rights are actually under siege here, and they have nothing to say about it. I'll tell you what, China and Russia, they're filled with people who thought it couldn't happen there, who thought that they would always be free and that someone would step in to stop the dictatorship. But it's here. It's happening now. And if you don't stand up and fight, you're going to wake up one morning, you're going to be in chains.
So we do have an update.
Not to go all Bentham X on you, but
yeah. Breaking news. Natasha Bertrand from CNN, she's the Pentagon correspondent at CNN, just put out a statement. Seth Stern, director of advocacy at Freedom of the Press Foundation, said that the government is legally prohibited from requiring journalists to surrender their right to investigate the government in exchange for access or credentials. This policy operates as a prior restraint on publication, which is considered the most serious of First Amendment violations. The government cannot prohibit journalists from public information merely by claiming it's a secret or even a national security threat.
That sounds correct. Yeah, it is illegal. But illegal is this regime's middle name. So,
all right. I think this is the lead into, go.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to be, hysterical about it, but Preston, if he goes after if the big five fall, we're next on the menu, I mean, he will not stop there. He will go until all of us are singing his praises or are gagged. But speaking of gags, NATO, they are not putting
no way, man. No way, man. Antifa. It's the move. The shift right now is Antifa.
That's right.
Antifa. Which this is. I just want to say, like the focus of this show from day one has been foreign affairs, international relations, and national security. We are increasingly seeing items that impact that, I think, in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I would not have guessed that we'd have a significant segment on press freedom. But if we're losing reporters at the Pentagon and can't talk about, we have no idea what's going on in Venezuela, that's a direct effect on our national security and foreign affairs. We're seeing a blend here with Antifa right now, so anti-fascist movement, and President Trump this week said that he is declaring them a major terror organization. And this is the concern here, the slippery slope concern, is that this opens the door for the targeting of anyone. The reason for that is, first off, there's no such thing as a major terror organization. That's not a designation. It's just a series of words put together that do not sound good. So nothing comes with that, right? Yeah. Whereas designating a group a foreign terror organization, an FTO, does have a list of things that happen. It opens up resources for the federal government to go after these people that are affiliated with the group. So we don't have a domestic terror list. There are organizations in the United States that have times been referred to as domestic terrorists. People have been tried as domestic terrorists, but we have avoided labeling these groups under any formal list of terrorism because the concern is that it very quickly infringes on their civil liberties. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how that goes. If you look at how we operate against Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, or even now the cartels, when somebody is affiliated with one of these groups, you just right away can seize their assets, shut off their access to the international banking system, prevent them from traveling, detain them borderline indefinitely. We don't do that to American citizens. So the expansion of the terror designation raises those concerns. Excuse me. Technically, we don't know where this goes yet because, again, President Trump just said some words. It doesn't even match up with anything. But it does look like that's the direction he's heading with Antifa. And the fact that Antifa is not, there's not a head of Antifa, right? There's not we can have some debates around who's leading Al-Qaeda or Islamic State right now, but there is a hierarchy there. And people will pledge their allegiance and say, we are the local branch of Al-Qaeda or the local branch of Islamic State. That doesn't exist with Antifa for the most part. So it's not clear who you go after and what affiliation looks like. Again, to take it back to the terrorism piece, if we find out that somebody was fighting with Islamic State in 2015, we might not let them into the country because it's like, wait a minute, that's a problem. What if somebody went to an Antifa rally in 2012? Like, are they still, are they a terrorist now? Do we block them from traveling? It opens up the floodgates. And I think we need more conversation around this, the local domestic designation of terror groups.
Well, you're full scale right. A domestic terror designation is unconstitutional. It is an infringement on the First Amendment, right? But also, we kind of already know the direction this is going. Yesterday, President Trump accused NPR of belonging to Antifa, which the NPR reporter was like, what? And then as NPR was reporting on this, you know how they are over there. It's like watching the Golf Channel with the way they report on the radio. But after they played the clip, the host very meekly was like, right. Anyways, and other news. And I just thought, I was like, I don't know what else you would do there if you're NPR, right? You're just like, what do you mean we're part of Antifa? So I agree with you. And I also think it's not really a real thing, right? Like it may be in Portland, not anywhere else in America, at least. And they're making Antifa out as if they are like the Weather Underground or the FNF or the Black Panthers or something. But like, these are not, like, Antifa is far from the militant groups of the 70s, right? I mean, it just seems like they've created an enemy that is kind of non-existent, maybe 2 people in each city who are unemployed and don't actually do anything that creates any change. They like what? Yell at police? Whoop-de-doo. Am I wrong in that? Or what do you think?
Well, something I think we have to keep in mind here is view this in a similar light to how we're going after Venezuela, in that we might focus too much on the words and miss the overall meaning or intent. Venezuela is not the top trafficker of drugs to the United States. Tren de Aragua is not the most significant cartel even in Venezuela. So why? Why Venezuela? Why that cartel? And you can speculate in a couple different directions. A part of me says that it's because they're an easy target in some ways. But the same applies here with the going after Antifa. I was talking to a couple guys yesterday that it's their profession, is studying political violence and terrorism. And they said, yeah, it's no problem going after Antifa. But the thing is, they're probably not in the top 10 if you're looking at domestic extremist groups in terms of number of members, in terms of actual acts they've carried out, acts that they have been planning, capabilities. Like, they're definitely not top 5, probably not even top 10. If you genuinely pulled a group of experts and said, we have to resolve the domestic extremist problem. And to be clear, I'm not talking about like how that term has been co-opted recently of somebody I don't like, but like people trying to do violence and kill others for their beliefs here in the United States. They said Antifa is not top 5.
No.
So if they're not like the top group by a long shot, then why? And I think that's what we have to spend more time trying to understand is it's not the elimination of Antifa that is the goal, or the elimination of, maybe I shouldn't say that. It's not the elimination of violent extremism that is the direct goal here. There's something broader. There has to be. Otherwise, again, there's multiple other groups you could go after that are more dangerous today than this one.
You are full scale right. But you also have
I
to
love
wonder.
that. Full scale right. I have never heard you say that before. You've said it a couple times. I like it. It's building me up. It's starting my day out well. Here for it.
Yeah, you're full scale right. Yeah. And I made me lose my train of thought.
Well,
but,
I need that here in Afghanistan. It's kind of gloomy. Yeah.
Well, dude, I imagine, dude, they're gonna, when they hear my rant about press freedom, they're gonna. Who is that girl? I'm not gonna say her name. What? Remember that girl who was shot for wanting to go to school? They're gonna do that to you. But you're gonna be like a martyr for like a bunch of white guys. This guy wanted to do a podcast and they killed him.
What an idiot.
Anyway,
yeah.
Yes. But you are. I agree. I think you are right. I also think, since there is, I mean, viewing this as cynically as possible, I don't know how else you can look at it. They're just going to use it to warrantlessly surveil Trump's political enemies. I'm sure we'll find that Letitia James is a member of Antifa all of a sudden. Same with Nancy Pelosi. And it is, I have no idea where this is going. He says he's going to expand it to more groups. What other groups exist? Like, these are very, if anything, very micro cells that don't really do anything. If you really want to crack down on political extremism, it is in radical Islamic terror here in the United States. It is also in right-wing militias, the Proud Boys. The Ku Klux Klan's kind of dead now, but they're still around, right? It is those two, the Patriot Front. I mean, it's all these groups, and they don't really seem to care. Go to the top of Wyoming. Go to the top of the smoke shaft in Wyoming, or not Wyoming, Idaho, and you will find what you were looking for there. But that's not really what this is about, is it?
Yeah, and there's a handful. I mean, it's a good thing that we have a hard time listing off these domestic extremist groups, because that means that they're probably not as they're not all that powerful, but there are a handful. One thing I want to note here is that if we go purely in the what is the thing where this is not a story in a week, right? We have to kind of prepare for that. And if this is not a story in a week, what it means is that this was just a symbolic statement by President Trump. He knows that a lot of people hate Antifa. They view Antifa as a far left organization, which I think is pretty accurate. A lot of their roots are more anarchism, but it's just a statement. It's just him saying something that a lot of people are like, yeah, all right. And we've seen this before, where just statement. We've seen this with the trade deals, right? You say something, and then people assume that is fact and something is happening because of it, when in reality, it was just some words put together. So I do think that's a possibility, that it doesn't actually turn into anything at all, because there's not a clear direction to take this. But the big issue is, if we don't have a leader, you don't get added to like a certain email distro list for your membership card for Antifa. It's not clear the direction you go. Again, is it that you went to a rally 3 years ago and there were Antifa people there? Is it like, I don't know again, talking to these experts yesterday, Michael Kinney and Colin Clark, I'm going to publish that episode later today. There's nothing that binds these people together. So when you want to go after them, it's not clear where you start. Like, if they show up at a rally and they're wearing an Antifa shirt, got it. There you go. That's probably a pretty clear sign. Outside of that, if you're trying to do like investigative work, how do you do it? That seems messy to me.
Well, isn't that the FBI's report year after year, Ben, that Antifa has no leader? It is too uncoordinated and too small for the FBI to be able to infiltrate it or even surveil it in any meaningful way.
I believe so, yeah.
So, I mean, you're right. Maybe he'll have forgotten about it. But they definitely tried this week to Reichstag fire Kirk's death, and it's kind of falling flat, because they are, I think, getting more pushback than they thought in regards to everything.
Yeah, a crazy week. Let's hit NATO real quick. I think we push questions the next week. We take on some more questions next week, but let's hit NATO real quick.
Yeah, all these questions were doomer too, so Anyway,
we're trying to be optimistic here. Let's end on this is not going to be a positive note. All right,
look,
let's
we
do it.
come on here in doom. You guys are supposed to lift us up with cheers. Oh, and speaking of which, you know what? This president is a coward because I do know a foreign terrorist. If he wants to do anything about him, his name's Doug the Pug. Okay, give him it. Where's his foreign major terrorist designation? Come on, dude.
Why do you think I came to Afghanistan? Couldn't handle the heat anymore.
I saw him on a Geico commercial. He couldn't even breathe. It made me sick. I wanted to throw up. Anyways, so NATO, who should do something about Doug the Pug if they ever want to work with us again, they Russia flew planes into Estonia's airspace, and they were there for 12 minutes, and then NATO kicked them out, drove them away. Not great. Estonia has they've introduced Article 4. People say NATO agrees to do that. This is a pet peeve of mine, and maybe I am the one who's wrong here, but I'm quite certain I'm right. That NATO doesn't need to agree to do Article 4. Anyone can evoke Article 4, and then everyone else, it's just how it is. Then everyone else has to go to the meeting. Article 5 is the one that everyone has to agree upon. So Estonia doing Article 4, I mean, that's not up to anyone else. That's up to Estonia. So that is my big gripe here.
It's also calling for a meeting. It's calling for a meeting. So let's calm down with this being a big deal. Just go to the meeting, NATO. Come on, you're there. You're in Brussels. You can send the ambassador that works in Brussels. Yeah.
Can you imagine? You're arguing for your wife and you start yelling, Article 4 at her. We have a family meeting.
Talk about this.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. So what do you think is going on here? Do you think are they gonna go Article 4 to Article 5? Maybe Article 6?
I think what we just found out in the last week is that Article 5 is not realistic anytime soon. Putin is testing the NATO alliance. He tested us over the course of the last year or so by firing 1 and 2 drones at a time that meandered into NATO territory. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Some of those very well may have just flown off course. It may have been electronic warfare issues and their GPS got jammed and they ended up in one of those countries. Whether that was intentional or not, our response led to Putin taking the next step, which was, look, if we can kind of write off 1 or 2 drones as a mistake, what if we do one that's impossible to say was an error? 19. And they did that about a week and a half ago. And sure enough, we wrote it off as a mistake. And what Putin is looking for here, in my opinion, is not testing NATO air defenses, not testing Article 5. He's testing to see if the alliance is standing together at all. Mm-hmm. Those 19 drones were met with silence here in the United States. I don't believe the DoD has said anything about it at all. Secretary Rubio, the State Department, said, well, Ukraine is also launching attacks into Russia, which seems like I don't even know how he considered those comparable. And then President Trump wrote it off as a mistake. No statements that I can find from senior U.S. officials about the NATO alliance is strong. We are standing together. We will defend every inch of NATO territory, anything like that. So what's the logical next step for Putin? Just ramp it up one step further. And we saw 3 MiG-31s flying to Estonian airspace yesterday. Same thing. It's just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. I think to look at that and say for the first time, and I don't know how, maybe ever, that manned Russian aircraft with Kinzhal ballistic missiles, it sounds like, strapped to their wings, flew into NATO airspace for the first time ever 1 week after NATO does nothing of I feel like the mental gymnastics to separate those two is pretty astounding. No, very clearly, this is just another step in that direction, Putin wanting to see what he can get away with. And we'll wait and see. But right now, it looks like he found yet another way that he can just continue to push into NATO and we're not doing anything.
Yeah, I think NATO needs to test Russia, is what I would say. They're going to keep doing over, then it is time to, send some aircraft over their border. And, I don't know what you do once you're there. I guess the same thing the Russians do, just kind of fly around, I guess. But it is time for them to start doing that. It is time for them to return it. And until they do that, Russia's going to continue. And maybe, the NATO people say, well, Russia wants us to do that for an escalation. Dog, Russia's not looking. They're acting as if they want to escalate with NATO, but in reality, they fear it, and they are wanting you to be scared. So, if anything, you should make Russia scared of escalating with you. And right now, you are not doing that.
That is a pet peeve of mine that we've seen for years now, which is we are terrified of what Russia might do. What the hell happened to where they were worried about what we might do? What is going on here? And I disagree in your statement that we should send NATO aircraft over Russia. I think we have the moral high ground right now of defending NATO territory. I think the move is next time Russian aircraft enter NATO airspace, they're shot down. It's happened before. Turkey shot down a Russian jet a few years ago, and nothing really happened because Russia and the world recognized, don't do that. Mm-hmm. When you send military aircraft or missiles or drones into NATO airspace, you are going to get intercepted. Like that's just don't do that. We've managed to make sure that doesn't happen for decades now. The mistake was made yesterday. When they try again in a week or so, shoot them down. The world will look at that and say, justified. Like if a Chinese fighter jet shows up over California, we could shoot them down. And nobody would say, God, America is escalating. It's what the hell was that jet doing over California? It's the same thing here.
I full-heartedly agree. We should announce that it is a no-fly zone. Once you cross NATO's borders, there is a no-fly zone for Russians and Belarusians because they love loopholes. Both of them. There will be no-fly zone. And I kind of digged Poland's talk about putting up a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine. I thought that was smart. And I was like, look, they want to play this game. Let's play. Unfortunately, the president refuses to actually do anything about this. But Rubio is talking a big game. And hopefully Rubio can convince him into this. But look, we're in some dangerous times. And the longer Putin tests and the longer the United States does not respond, the deeper trouble we are going to be in. That is for certain. And it worries me. It worries me. I have no doubt that NATO, without us, can take Russia, But I worry that they will not have the initiative until Russia is in Estonia, until they are in Latvia and Lithuania. That worries me. And I don't know. I just hope that we don't show up 4 years late this time. I guess we didn't show up 4 years, so we showed up 2 years late, didn't we? But, Yeah. So.
Well, it's getting dark here. You can't tell from the background, but it's getting dark here in Afghanistan. I got to get back to the safety of my area back here.
Have they at least asked you to join?
The Taliban?
Yeah.
No.
Would you join if they were like, we'll give you your own tribe?
Would I join the Taliban?
Well, you're there.
That's your question. But the National Resistance Front is up north. Those are the boys. Those are the guys. Those are the real heroes of Afghanistan.
Are they good though? Are they doing anything though?
They're doing what they can. They don't have a lot of resources right now, but
I see.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you will liberate the people, Preston. All right, folks. Yeah. Well, that is this episode. Give us 5 stars, like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next week. And hopefully you'll see us next week. I mean, God knows what. Maybe we'll be a designated terror group, or maybe he'll have banned podcasts. I mean, who knows at this point? Anyways, later, guys.